Hello, and welcome to the Elevate Entrepreneur, where we decode the success of some of the greatest entrepreneurs that I've met, that I know, that I trust. These individuals have not only built their business up, but they've also impacted lives for the better. Here you will learn not only how to grow your business, but also inspire you to want to be just a little bit better. I'm your host, Raylan Davis. My entire intention is to remove obstacles and excuses as to why people can't realize they deserve more. With that being said, let's jump into this week's episode. Stay motivated, stay elevated. With me today, I have an amazing guest. Her name is Danute, and yes, you have to say it with your hands like this, chef's kiss. It's a beautiful thing. Danute is a powerful consultant. She is an author. We just got done looking at her book just a second ago, which we'll get into later on today. So first and foremost, Danute, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, first and foremost.
Well, thank you. And as you've said, I'm Danute Debney Shaw, with an abbreviated name because there were too many names once upon a time in there. And just to tell you a teeny bit about myself, I have over 25 years in management, organization, and law. So I am an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a decision strategist, and I'm still involved in doing federal practice work on a contract basis in the legal area. And so my work is really with innovation and innovating your decision strategy as it applies to work, as it applies to your personal life, and primarily through incorporating a full court press approach to how you're going to utilize your own tools and skills, starting with subjective awareness, then going into the intellectual, rational part, and then into the creative, if that's appropriate. So that's just a really thumbnail sketch of what I'm involved in.
So you were kind of getting into this a little bit. So walk me through what do you mean by you start with the subjective, like when it comes to decision making?
Well, because, many people will take on, they'll get gurus. They will look for people who can help them expand their business practice, their personal lives, but they don't come to the table in a position to really receive as much of it as they can, so that they can take ownership of it, so that it can really be theirs. And so in the book, for example, my book, which is How the Tin Man Found His Brain, I might as well show that to you right there.
I'm assuming you're a big fan of Wizard of Oz. That's just a guess.
Well, the Wizard of Oz is a great metaphor because, see, they all already had what they needed to work with. They were looking for parts of themselves out there somewhere. And I make that point in my book, although not necessarily in my work directly, but the book speaks to that underlying notion that we all have so many more resources than we realize from which to make the decisions we need to make, from which to reach out for the kinds of support that we need, the information that we need. Because knowledge and information is great, but you've got to be able to work with it. And if you're not in a position to be able to really take it on, it's kind of like apply, slide, apply, slide. It might as well be a Band-Aid. So
you're mentioning, though, the subjective, right? So people come to these gurus, but they're not even ready to receive. So go ahead and explain kind of your process, how it differs.
Well, my process depends. And this is another thing. It is very targeted towards who I might be working with. For example, if I'm working with a business organization, and which I may have in the past, they may have an issue in dealing with a platform that they want to roll out in a given department. What I end up doing is working with the how. When I say the how, I mean with the judgment that needs to be applied in order to be able to unfold that platform. Because it's great to have the steps. Okay, you do this, you do that, you do the other. But when do you do it? How do you do it? What if this isn't working the way it's supposed to in the matrix of the scheme of things? And by subjective awareness, that's what I'm talking about, sort of the judgment factor in a situation like that. Now, there may be a different kind of situation where someone is dealing with a dilemma as to an approach that they might be taking towards unfolding a division in their particular company, or perhaps some aspect of their personal life, because the same thing applies. We bring ourselves to our work. So, people say to me, is this business? Is this for your personal life? It's really for both. Because we are who we are wherever we bring ourselves. And work is incredibly impacted. Like they talk about emotion, that there shouldn't be any emotion in the workplace. Well, you know as well as I do, there's tons of emotion in the workplace, particularly when there's like a meeting of some kind. There's a lot of tension, there's expectation, there's challenge, there's competition, there's ego. All of that ends up being emotional. When people think of how to govern their emotion, they don't realize that a lot of that does start with where they position themselves in terms of their strength to begin with in entering the arena.
Yeah, okay. So then we do this objective first, and
Yes.
what comes after that?
Well, let me give you an example. I'll give you a story, a little story that will kind of unfold this. And I use this in my book as well. And it's not something I recommend that anybody do, because it's really kind of a dangerous episode that took place. But this took place in Washington, D.C. It was in the media. And the reason that I know how it unfolded is because for once, when they were interviewing this gentleman about what went through his mind and what action he took, they actually let him answer the question. As you well know, being the professional that you are as an interviewer, you have to give people the space to unfold what they're talking about. But often in these very clipped interviews, it's kind of like they stick the mic in your face and then for 2 seconds and then pull it away and won't let you tell the story. So this guy was standing on a metro stop in Washington, D.C., and I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar there, but the subway system is called the Metro, and as it leaves the city itself, Washington, D.C. proper, it goes up above ground. And this is important to the story. I think this was like a Monday sometime earlier in the week, and people were going to work in the morning. This gentleman was standing on a platform. The train was coming in very, very rapidly, and he was just one of the other members or passengers that were going to be getting on. Suddenly, a man falls upon the track, and he didn't fall on the live wire rail, but he fell on the other two diagonally. And everybody's like, "Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!" They're all running around because there's no time to jump down and save this guy. There's just no time. The train is already very visible. It's coming. So what went through this one man's mind in order to save this man? His first thought was purely irrational, not irrational, but irrational. There's no rationale to it. He thought, I can save this man. I can save this man. That was his first thought. Now, that doesn't really tell you much. It's just this feeling that he had, this sense that he had that he could do it. Second of all, his rational kicked in. He had some mechanical understanding. He wasn't an engineer, but he did have some mechanical background. So he's thinking, okay, there's an undercarriage that has an arc, right? And then there are stones because we're above ground here. We're not on the concrete in the city. So there are stones between the rails. So his rational mind is quickly going through that. The third thing was his creative aspect that kicked in. And he thought, I'm a little guy. He's a little guy. If I just pull him straight and lie on top of him, the train will run over both of us. Wow. Now that's outrageous. And this really happened. This is straight out of the news. This is public information. This happened a few years back, and that's exactly what he did. He jumped down, and everybody was like, oh, because now we've got two people about to get smushed by a train that's coming, right? And I cannot imagine what the conductor thought coming into the station. Yeah. I've got one man lying there. I can't stop the train at this fast. I mean, the train was ultimately stopped, but the conductor, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but the conductor took the train past the station, right, to be able to clear where the bodies were, assuming that they were gone. Nope. He said he could feel the train roll right over the back of his body. That's how close it was. Jeez. But see, now this is a dramatic situation. I'll give you a very quick, almost silly situation. This happened to me, again, in Washington, D.C., because I've done a lot of work there. I was at a metro stop. I had a lot of bags hanging over my arms, right, at the stop, waiting for the train to come in. The train comes in. I'd been looking at my phone. I thought, oh, I got to grab the train. So I jump onto the train. I walk in. The train is there for a few seconds, not that many. They just let the passenger out, let the others in. It's a quick stop. This woman timidly creeps up to me and says, excuse me. Now, this is a businesswoman in a suit, somebody who works in the city. Excuse me, was that your bag over there on the bench? Now, she says this to me as the doors are closing. Yeah. I was already in there for a couple of seconds, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I was in there. She's asking me this. I'm looking, I'm like, that is my computer. That's my computer sitting there. I thought I had it on my arm, and I usually look back to make sure that I've gotten everything, but somehow this time I didn't notice. Well, now it's too late. She kept saying over and over again, like she's in shock, I should have said something. I should have said something. I should, I mean, literally over and over again. And I was hoping and praying she would stop saying that because I wanted to turn to her and go, yes, you should have said something when I could have run out and gotten my bag. So I had to go to the next stop, got back. Long story short, it was still there. It was about 10 minutes, though, that it was sitting there. And that was my computer with, half my life in it. But see, this is where this woman didn't have the self-trust. And this is what I talk about in the book and ultimately in the work that I do. You have to get to a place. You have to. None of us have to do anything. But the point is that if you want to work the most effectively in your life, coming from a place of self-trust is where your decision-making goes strength to strength to strength. Is it always going to be right? Are you always going to succeed with everything? Of course not. But the point is to use as much as you can of your own power. And it's not the kind of power that imposes ego or throws it. It's also all the people that I know, and I've worked with some very powerful people and for some very powerful people, they all take this kind of approach. And my goal is to bring it to consciousness, to help people get to that place where they're using it regularly. They get used to how their internal system works and how it speaks to them. And then, there are many other examples. Some of them are about resilience in the book, and that I draw upon in my own personal life, because this has been a lifelong journey for me. And I've incorporated everything, having worked for the Federal Bankruptcy Court, having worked as a unit manager for network news at ABC in New York in an earlier career, having been involved in performing when I was even younger, being an international negotiator for an airline, and then a federal practice counsel, now a decision strategist. There's constant revision, renewal, reassessment, innovation, that we all don't have to have all these different careers or experiences, but we need it in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, let's talk more about self-trust, because let's go back to your example. I know that feeling, and the only thing I can draw on is high school, right? Mm-hmm. You're in high school. They said, what's the answer to this question? And you're like, I know it. I don't know, but do I know it? I don't know if I know it. I'm not going to raise my hand. And it's too late. Somebody else answers.
Somebody else answered it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I often jokingly, I never knew that this was the connection, but there's something that I say to Danute all the time, which is the reason why I've been successful in business is because I'm too stupid to know I can't be. But that's really, it's a self-trust thing. Now that when I think more about it, it's just when I have an idea, I just do it. I just go do the thing. Versus, I think a lot of people, especially that I've worked with when they first start out their careers as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of mistrust. I don't have any evidence to support me doing this. So how can we get past that lack of trust? How can we maybe do we build it up? Or again, my answer has always been to just ignore that dumbass voice in your head, but yours seems to be more methodical. So how can we do that?
It depends. And depending on who I'm working with and, what the issues are, it's not, I'll give an example. I'll give an example of a group that I worked with. I once did a workshop for 165 financial service officers, and it was supposed to be on communications. Well, there are certain basic communication principles. You've heard this in people that you've interviewed and spoken with. There's certain principles that nobody holds the copyright on those principles. Those are just basic principles, and you can apply them to a given context, et cetera, et cetera. But I went further. I said, what are their challenges? What's creating the impediment? Where are the doubts and hesitations? As what I asked. And the person who was running it said, well, they complain of this, they talk of that, they talk of the other. And this is what I built in and created, developed a 3-hour event for them, which I could see the eyes popping and I could see people furiously making some notes, and they got to do some exercises with each other about that. So, that's one example. If I were talking to a given person who was saying, I'm not sure I trust myself, like that woman in the metro stop who she knew she should have said something. Now, that's a kind of a silly, tepid example, but it's still an example of why did she hesitate? What would have been the tragedy of simply saying, hey, is that your bag? And I go, oh, no, that's not. What, is she going to look foolish if she brought this up to me? And this is clearly a woman who functions out in the world. I tell you, she looked like some kind of exec somewhere. And so people at every level and in every situation, every position, I want to say, in life, whether that's being a sanitation worker or being an astrophysicist or whoever, I've met people, and it's amazing how some of them can still not have strong self-trust. So you're saying, how do you do it? How do you do it? Well, I talk about this in the book. I talk about how we kind of get programmed out of being connected to ourselves early on in life because our parents try to put us on a track. they want to get us going out into the material world. So pay attention, sit up straight, do what the teacher says, do well in school, you'll get a good job, blah, 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 that whole pattern. And they're not entirely wrong. That's their job. They're trying to do this. They're trying to get us going. But often we lose a lot of the creativity. We lose a lot of that perceptual awareness, that immediate sort of, our brains are fantastic in terms of what they can pick up. They can pick up all sorts of subtle, amazing things. And we have yet to learn why and how all that happens. A lot is being done now to investigate that, but we can't wait for that investigation. We have to start working with ourselves. So here's the point. We have to work with ourselves. Bit by bit by bit, in terms of situation, test yourself. Test yourself in little ways where it doesn't actually matter that much. How are you perceiving a situation? How's it playing out? This happened here. I made these decisions. This is how I felt. This is what came to me. I know a gentleman, he's an attorney, as a matter of fact, extremely, extremely successful. He's expanded. And he said he was a businessman out there for many years, became an attorney later in life. And he said he was always getting these hunches, these hits on things. And he'd be like, kind of push it aside because he wasn't seeing the logic of it. Now, that doesn't mean the logic isn't there somewhere, but he just wasn't immediately getting it, right? He was just getting the hit. Like this man who said he just knew he could save the guy. But then he went to the analysis, and then he went to, the imagination of how that analysis might help him save the man. Well, that's just like one little type of example. But the point is, if we start working with where we come from inside ourselves and strengthen that, and there's lots of ways to go about it. There are exercises that one can do, but the simplest and easiest way really is like developing a muscle. It's like developing a muscle. It's testing yourself. And none of this subjectivity that I talk about, this subjective awareness, this intuitive process is intended to mean that, now I think I can fly, I'm going to jump off a building. That's not the kind of stuff we're talking about. We're talking about things that are then considered in a rational and reasonable way. And then you take the two together, which is why in my book I quote a lot of people who talk about the intuitive process and the intuition. I mean, I have headings and on my chapters, I quote people who are fairly prominent people who have obviously relied upon it throughout their lives. And we can all do that in all our decisions. Someone said to me once, this is a gentleman asked me a question. He said, I can't really think that much. I can't be thinking all the time. And I said, it's not thinking. It's an awareness. It's a perceptual awareness. Like, you're sitting in front of a mic, you're talking to me, you're wearing a hat. You don't have to be looking around at everything all the time or thinking about it. This is your context. It becomes the same thing inside. And this is how innovation can occur. I also give a lot of examples in the book about survival. People who have gotten through all sorts of amazing situations. How did they get to that resilience? Well, they had to work with themselves, perhaps not fully consciously. They wouldn't sit there and write a book and say, okay, I did this, and I did that, and I did the other. But they were clearly doing it. They're clearly engaging their subjectivity in a very, very powerful way and listening to the ideas that come up and going, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not so. But here's one. Here's something that just showed up. Let's see what we can do with that.
I love how you depict the idea of well, first of all, the self-trust. And to go backwards a little bit, there's a huge problem with entrepreneurs that I work with when they don't trust themselves enough to offer service.
Right.
And that's like the first thing that came to mind. Like, for example, when my whole point is like, if you know and you can feel that you could help someone, right? And you can serve them, whatever that is for your business, but there's a way that you could do it. There's an interesting thing where I do not care about the outcome as much. I used to, right? But now that I've been doing so long, it just comes naturally. Hey, do you want me to help you with this? I think I can help you. That's it.
Yes.
And that's kind of like going back to that woman saying, hey, is that your bag? It's just, hey, do you need help? It's really that simple. But what's funny is everyone does this thing. A lot of people do this thing where they go, oh, I think I can help them. This is an opportunity to serve. But what if I come off and I look foolish? What if I come off as salesy? What if versus just going, hey, I think I can help. Do you want me to help you? They say no, you go, okay, no problem. Like, no big deal. But I want to go back to as well the intuition of creativity. It reminds me of this joke. Have you ever listened to Mitch Hedberg before?
I don't think so.
Oh my God! Well, first of all, he's hilarious. But he's a comedian, very punchy. Like every joke is like one hitter. But he has this joke, and he said, there's sometimes I'm laying in my hotel bedroom and I'm comfortable and I'm about to pass out and go to sleep, and I have an idea for a great joke. Then I have to sit there for the next couple minutes and convince myself it's not funny so I don't have to get up and write it. But that's that joke is so true when it comes to intuition. And I've been noticing this lately where I have an idea, and instead of like there's a moment of choice where you go, I got to go write that idea down.
Yes.
Or I go, oh, I'll remember it. But guess what, Danute? I don't think I've ever fucking remembered one of those ideas. Okay. So it's that discipline.
Wait, just a moment. You don't remember till somebody else comes up with it and has done something with it, and you go, "Oh, I had that."
That was my idea. Yeah, there's because also the funny things I do this thing often with my wife Kayla, where I'll go, "Man, I got this brilliant idea," and I walk her through it, and she'll go, "Honey, you had that idea 2 years ago." And I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool. It's still a good idea, I guess." So what I'm hearing you talk about is this. It's almost like this intuition, this awareness of, hey, I have it, being open to the idea. Because again, I don't know if this aligns with what you often say, but those are not my ideas. It's like being open to someone else is going to get the idea, right? And it's like the idea has to be created.
Right. If you don't do it, someone else will. And it's very funny how it works. How many times have you heard friends say, "Oh, I thought of that X amount of years ago," or "I thought about that when," and they didn't do anything, but eventually somebody else got, we humans are kind of oddly linked in this sort of collective unconscious or whatever, where ideas are out there. And then it's a question of being able to pull them in. But to go back to what you were talking about, this notion of confidence versus confusion, this is where this confidence versus confusion thing, people get timid about acting. Not necessarily. Sometimes we just get lazy. I mean, I get things popping into my head, and I don't necessarily do it all the time either. But the confidence of knowing, this is me coming up with an idea. Oop, got to go with it. Got to do something. Got to say something. Got to have that pad by my bed and at least scribble a little bit. Because you're very right when you're talking about ideas coming sometimes in the evening before you go to sleep, but even more so sometimes in dreams, sometimes when you wake up, because your mind is free of all the other layers.
Shower, brushing your teeth. When you're automatically in something else, your brain goes, I can run.
I can go there because, see, too much of the time, our rational brain, which is a fantastic... See, I always think of the rational part of us, which we kind of have made God. I think of the rational part of us as really being subordinate to that intuitive, subjective awareness part of our brain, because you can come up with a perfectly rational idea inspirationally, but a rational idea isn't necessarily going to be inspirational. You know what I'm saying? It's like the rational this to that to the other. That's the syllogistic reasoning of sort of, you can come up with nonsense and still be using logical methodology. But the truth is that with the inspired concept, if you're working together, you can get the best of what both can do. And the more you kind of work with yourself in little ways doing it, the more confidence you build, because then that's a good idea. Got to do something with that one. And, sometimes these ideas come up and they're not that important. Not everything is, going to be a life and death thing. Not everything is going to make or break your business as an entrepreneur. But entrepreneurs need this, and they need innovation, and they need to be able to refresh themselves. They also very much need to be able to rely on what's coming through. And I did a presentation actually about this whole process for entrepreneurs with someone else, and as a part of a podcast. And we talked about this notion of developing ourselves into our own personal platform of approach, so that we have confidence in how we're going about something. For example, I knew a businessman, and this is how well evolved he was. I'll tell you this. He would look at a deal that would come up, and he would think to himself, it looks good. It sounds good. I'm not feeling it. There's something I'm missing, something I'm not seeing, maybe something I'm catching that's very subtle. It's not showing up in my rational thinking. Something's not going to work about this for me. Now, this man is not very young. He's probably in his 50s. He's not an elderly person, but he's had some time to work with himself on this. He knows if that's how he feels, he doesn't do the deal. And he said, furthermore, I don't even care if someone else took the deal and ran with it and something incredible happened. He knows it wouldn't work for him because he's tested himself. He's ignored it enough.
That's that self-confidence.
Right.
Yeah, that's a self-confidence.
Enough times. Yeah.
Well, Danute, here's where that's so important. And again, I don't know, because here's the thing, right? I would say the intuition, I would say maybe the subjective,
the subjective part of you.
Because like the feeling part gets sticky for me. Like people go, this doesn't feel right, but it's like, emotion. I don't give a shit about your the emotion. Yes, because I'm like the emotion. Because this is where Yeah, because for me, this is what Elevated is about, is that sometimes people say no to things, and it's the emotion of the past, right? That's fear.
Right.
It's not the same as doesn't feel right.
Let me interject something right here. See, we need like another layer of language, because the word feel, as you say, all too often applies to this, am I feeling sad? When this man says it doesn't feel right, he means his perception. He's perceiving that something is off. He's not being emotional about it. He's not afraid of it. He's not, overly excited. He's just looking at it to see what it might be, what it might not be. But see, we don't have that other layer of language.
We need another word
feeling
for it.
with perception rather than feeling with emotion, because emotion then takes us into the psychology. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I have spoken with people who I can tell when we have parsed something, taken something apart, because that's one of the things that I do when I'm working on a consulting basis with people who are, for their business effort, or as I say, for their personal effort. We'll take the situation apart and we'll examine aspects of it, and we'll see what the impact might be. Now, you can't necessarily come up with every possibility, but you can come up with the bigger, broader strokes, and then you can determine what your risk-benefit analysis is there. Like, how much are you willing to risk? How much do you feel like, oh, that doesn't matter, that's okay? Like with wealthy people who have true wealth, they don't worry about, they just worry about how much they can stand to lose when they take their risks. They don't even worry about how much they're going to make. They know they can make a great deal. What do they stand to lose? And that's the kind of thing you need to take apart. You can use your rational aspect to do that. But then when the real answer starts staring you in the face and you're going, I don't know, I'm not sure, I can't really see it. Well, that's when I am picking up that there are other problems, and those are probably largely emotional problems or psychological problems, an arena that's not my arena. In fact, I have at times suggested to people, well, maybe some other counseling or being able to kind of parse these things out at another layer with somebody might be beneficial for you. I don't tell people, I don't try to send them to therapy or something like that, but I suggest that we need to that they need to perhaps look at some other aspect of why their decision-making is impeded. And see, whenever we clutch something really like this, that's when we can make the biggest mistakes. Because when fear is governing, when you're not coming from confidence, but you're coming from fear, you have to it's nice if you get to a place where you can make the right decision. You can make the right decision. Now, what does it take to make the right decision? And if there is a lot at stake, you might need more knowledge. You might need to refer to somebody. You might need to look for more background. Maybe need to do a little bit of research of some kind to get to your, a lot of us like the shortcut. They want somebody else to tell you, no, this is a good deal. Go for it. Everybody's doing well with it. Run with it. Well, maybe that'll work. Maybe that'll work if this is a very trusted resource and that gives you the shortcut you need. That might be an authority you can rely on. But you need to get to a place where you feel that you own whatever that choice is. And not, I shouldn't have listened to him. This person said it was blah, 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 blah. You've got to own it. You got to get to the place where I felt this would be the right thing to do. I did what I could with it. It didn't work. I've learned something, and the rest of it I toss away because regret is another thing I talk about. There's no point. You learn from what you can, and sometimes things just don't work out for other reasons. The earth shifted under everybody's feet, and like COVID, when COVID showed up, when the pandemic showed up, that shifted a lot for people in so many ways. In some ways, it created some opportunity. It shut other people down completely. Reinvention was needed. New steps in entrepreneurship, new steps in developing and augmenting what you can do, providing services perhaps that you didn't think you would be providing, but that might be, additional complementary pieces to what you provide that then has allowed you to move forward and through. There's lots of creativity that ends up being involved in entrepreneurship. And if you're not trusting yourself and trusting in your capability to navigate the creativity and also to get the resources and help that you need when you don't know something. Yeah, if technology is not really your big thing, then you need some help with that. Maybe you're a terrific techie and that's not your problem. But strategizing becomes a challenge, and you need to kind of get your muscle going on that. It's also a wonderful exercise in that self-awareness. And if you find that you are being impeded by a lot of fear over and over again, fear keeps showing up, and your choices, like one person said to me, oh, whenever I listen to my intuition, it's always wrong. Well, that can't exactly be true. It can't always be wrong. something else is factoring in. And
well,
it's
it
just
also could be what you needed at the time. Like if your intuition was quote unquote wrong, no, it just could be that was just one of the building blocks you needed. Like for example, I had an intuition to launch something recently. It was a workshop I did that was in person. It didn't go well. Like, I mean, that's not fair. There was 20 people that came and we had a really, really good time, and it was a really good retention effort. But in my mind, I was doing it because I thought it was going to make a lot of money, and then we did. Yeah. We lost money. But here's the thing, though. I needed to do that to take the lessons for the next one. So my intuition was quote unquote wrong, but it's what I needed at the time, right? I needed the lesson more. Yeah, I needed the lesson more than I needed the money.
Well, exactly. And see, then in that case, if you look at it the other way, it's not necessarily wrong. Sometimes, everything can't always go perfectly because we don't always learn from it. Not that we have to go through failure upon failure upon failure. But most people who are very successful, I mean, come on, Ford, what did he do? He filed bankruptcy twice, 3 times before he got that car going. I mean, there are a lot of steps. And to look at them, that even that term failure, sometimes things don't work quite the way we had anticipated or we imagined or dreamed it would be. But there's usually something to be learned, even if it's, well, we're not doing it that way again. There's something to be gotten from it. And in my own life, I've had so many twists and turns and changes. The rug would get pulled out from under because you're working on for example, even when I was working at the federal bankruptcy court, which I worked for 5 years, well, the judge stepped down. And then it was supposed to be a longer term assignment, but the judge left. So that job ended. I went to San Francisco to do some work that related to bankruptcy, which was my background in the federal courts. And the gentleman who was bringing me on board for a business reorganization, he got laid off. That whole contract was lost, and that went away. Now, but was it wrong? No. I ended up spending some time readjusting and shifting, and I ended up doing international negotiations for an aviation organization. I would never have had that opportunity if I hadn't trusted to take some steps that looked like they were not the answer, but they got me to where I needed to be, one way or another. Do you know what I'm saying? I would never, ever have had that other option, which was tremendous. I traveled. I learned a great deal. I learned a great deal about the company and how it worked and how it didn't. I'd already had a lot of training there because when you work for federal bankruptcy court, you see how businesses fail. You see how they pick themselves up or don't. You see where the endeavor takes place. It's tempting to think, oh, okay, well, I went into a bankruptcy. It means I cut off a few assets here and there. I let a few things go. I can reorganize it. It will work. No, often you need to look at a lot more of what got you there to begin with. And if you don't do that, and that includes the people participation of the company as well, not just how the budgeting and how the client effort went and how there are different aspects that are much more holistic. And if you're coming to that analysis with that understanding to begin with, you can troubleshoot what you need to. You can shore up what you need to. You can build what you need to, because now, you've learned something, but you've also been able to identify it. If you keep going through a mistake, what you feel is mistake or failure upon failure, as some people do, never identifying some of the crucial aspects of why it got to that, because they're looking at the mechanistic. Okay, this is I had this much money in and this much money came back, and that's an important aspect, but that's not the whole thing.
Well, listen. Obviously, time flies. That's number one, because it's already time. But here's what my final thing I wanted to kind of go over with you was, first and foremost, thank you, because I again, it's just interesting how this keeps coming up for me, which is this idea of like creation and again, I'm now connecting because of you, the idea of self-trust. So this, I think, was spot on and exactly what I needed at the time. The last few minutes here, go ahead and tell us again where we can find your book and anything else you want to plug before we get out of here.
Well, actually, people can reach me at my business contact, which is Silafantis. In fact, you can kind of see the sign above.
Yeah, what does the name mean, Silafantis?
It's like Raytheon. Raytheon is a defense contractor, but who knows what Raytheon is until they figure it out. Yeah. My inspiration when I started it was to sort of be behind this umbrella effort, and that name came into my mind, and there it is, Silafantis. But now my brand is really much more about Danute Debney Shaw, myself. But the company remains. The company owns my book, which is How the Tin Man Found His Brain. You can easily find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I'm in LinkedIn as well. But you can look under Silafantis or my name, Danute Debney Shaw. And the email is dds@silafantis.com. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. The book, again, How the Tin Man Found His Brain, One Attorney's Path for Perceptual Development. It's available through Barnes & Noble. It's available through Amazon. Virtually any independent store can actually order it.
I'll drop the links in the description as well, so people can pick it up.
Okay, great.
But yeah, this was amazing. Thank you so much for educating us, and we'll have to do this again. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it. It was great.
All right, thank you all for listening. Stay elevated and stay motivated. Danute, that was great.
Thank you for listening to The Elevated Entrepreneur. If you want to check out more about the guest, look at the description below. And as always, if you're a beginner coach or even someone that's seasoned and you're looking to join a community of like-minded individuals, learn about branding, lead generation, sales, you name it, think about applying to the Elevated Coaches Academy. You can learn more about that in the description below. I look forward to having you in the next episode. We'll talk to you soon. Stay motivated, stay elevated.